Let's pretend for a moment that you've planted a beautiful flower garden, and then suddenly people start walking all over your newly planted garden. This is what happens in our lives if we don't set up personal boundaries. Think of personal boundaries as a fence with a gate that limits who could come into your personal space and who you need to keep out or at a distance. You need to give your consent before someone can enter your personal space. Consent is giving someone permission to be in your personal space or touch your personal things. Consent is a two-way street. You need to give your consent for someone to touch you or your things, but someone also needs to give you their consent to touch them or their things. So you give consent or not based on your personal boundaries. Let's define personal boundaries. Personal boundaries are the choices you get to make about your body within relationships, whether they are romantic, professional, friends, family, acquaintances, or even strangers. You will need to have different rules for different people in your life. For example, you may feel comfortable hugging a close friend or family member, but you probably wouldn't feel comfortable hugging a coworker and definitely not a stranger. It is up to you to decide what your personal boundaries are and when to set them. Your boundaries will communicate your values and preferences within that relationship. These boundaries are like a roadmap in that they will show another person how to best have a healthy relationship with you. Speaking of roadmap, boundaries like consent are a two-way street. You will need to clarify your boundaries in establishing rules, and the other person in the relationship will need to clarify their boundaries in setting up their rules. We are all unique, and everyone will have differing views of what is okay and what is not okay. Your boundaries need to be respected, but you also need to respect the boundaries of others. Something that might be a yes to you may be a no to someone else. A no always trumps someone's yes. What I mean by this is if you want to hug someone and they don't, you need to avoid hugging them, as hard as that may be. Let's consider a specific example of differing boundaries. Have you ever had someone get too close to you? I like to think of this as our personal space bubble. We all have a personal space bubble about the distance of a hula hoop around us. But this distance can vary from person to person. An appropriate way to handle someone being too close is to politely say, "I feel uncomfortable when you stand or sit so close. I need a little more space to feel comfortable." Let's move on and talk about types of personal boundaries. First, there are physical boundaries. These are boundaries you decide you're comfortable with regarding your space as well as your body. This includes deciding who is allowed in your personal space and who is allowed to touch you. Next, there are emotional boundaries. This type of boundary includes what you are comfortable sharing and what you want to keep private. Last, there are time boundaries. This type of boundary establishes how you want to prioritize your time and when you want to take rest. It's important to realize we all have different capacities and needs for margins in our lives to stay healthy and happy. An example of a varying time boundary would be a friend who wants to text you at midnight, but you need your rest. It's important to clarify this time boundary with your friend. Let's pause and consider why it is so important to set up personal boundaries. They keep you emotionally and physically safe. Personal boundaries protect your time and your energy. They also protect your relationships from misunderstanding and hurt feelings. Personal boundaries uphold your values and the importance of you as a person. Keep in mind, if you don't set up boundaries, the people around you will set them for you. The friend texting you at midnight will continue unless you clarify your boundary. If you allow others to set your boundaries, it will lead to you feeling frustrated, uncomfortable, and possibly unsafe. When setting up boundaries within a relationship, it's important to pay attention to the inner voice that says, I'm uncomfortable. I feel unsafe. Something just doesn't feel right. I'm feeling pressured. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I feel embarrassed. I feel like I should talk to someone I trust. These feelings are so important, and don't ignore them. It's your right to speak up and clearly state, I feel uncomfortable, or I feel unsafe, or I feel overwhelmed, whatever else you may be feeling, and then state, I need you to stop what you're doing. But what if the other person doesn't respect your boundary and the clearly stated rule? You need to remove yourself from the situation. Seek help from a trusted family member or friend. If it's a dangerous situation, you need to call 911 right away. Let's pivot and talk about being mindful when you might be making another person feel uncomfortable. You'll want to watch for the following cues common to someone feeling uncomfortable around you. The other person might be avoiding eye contact. They might be turning away. They might have limited conversation. They might be laughing at odd times. They might have folded arms. They might be talking really fast. If you are unsure if you're making the other person feel uncomfortable, ask, how are you doing? And am I making you feel uncomfortable? In conclusion, there will come a time when your boundaries will be tested. There will be a time when you feel uncomfortable or unsafe. Be prepared. I strongly encourage you to speak up. You are important, and your boundaries reflect your values, and your boundaries need to be respected. Remember, it may be necessary to ask for help from a trusted friend, teacher, or family member. Your safety is important. In conclusion, clarify your boundaries, respect other people's boundaries, and stay safe.